through partnerships in trade, investment, health, and renewable energy. On Wednesday, President William Ruto and Prime Minister of Belgium, Alexander De Croo, signed a memorandum of understanding on political consultations that will provide a framework for engagement in partnerships. On the other hand, the European Commission is committed to Kenya-European Union Economic Partnership Agreement that is set to be signed in June this year. Here are the details. Belgium will support Kenya's development agenda through partnerships in trade, investment, health, and renewable energy. It will also back peace and security plans in the region and climate adaptation. President William Ruto and Prime Minister of Belgium, Alexander De Croo, signed a memorandum of understanding on political consultations that will provide a framework for engagement in partnerships. Speaking at FPS Chancery of Prime Minister in Brussels, Belgium, Prime Minister Croo committed to supporting Kenya's food security agenda.
No, we'd love to do that. Okay. Mr. President, thank you. Enjoy your time here and please reach out to us.
On health, Kenya will work with Belgium biotechnology companies to establish insulin vaccine and cancer drug manufacturing companies in the country. The two leaders agreed to work together to advance the growth of renewable energy sector in Kenya and promote carbon credit management. Other areas of partnership discussed include port management, the digital economy, and Kenya's position on the Ukraine war. On the other hand, the European Commission is committed to Kenya-European Union Economic Partnership Agreement that is set to be signed in June this year. During a meeting on Wednesday in Brussels, Belgium, President William Samoei Ruto and the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Valdis Dombrovskis, agreed to review the agreement. Mr. Dombrovskis said the Commission is willing to support Kenya in its effort to access the European Union market. He praised Kenya's global leadership in transitioning into a green economy. On his end, the head of state acknowledged the European Union's importance as a trade and investment partner for Kenya and the rest of Africa. Butis Njeri, GBS News. The International Commission of Juries yesterday called on the head of state to recall and adhere to the oath of office. This is after the commission observed government interference through the security agencies and citizen misconduct during the Monday demonstrations organized by the opposition party Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, which prevented demonstrators from exercising their rights. While addressing the media in Nairobi, the commission's chairman, Mr. Protas Saende, reiterated the jury's commission's call to all Kenyans, and particularly the political class, to steer the country away from this potential break, adapt unified path, and desist from activities that further paralyze the country. Let's take a look.
The National Commission of Jurists have called on the head of state to recall and adhere to the oath of office. This came after the commission observed the government's interference through the security agencies and citizen misconduct during the Monday 20th and 27th March demonstrations organized by the opposition party Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition, which prevented the demonstrators from exercising their rights. Speaking when he addressed the media today, the Commission's chairman, Mr. Protas Saende, reiterated the Jurist Commission's call to all Kenyans and particularly the political class to steer the country away from the potential brink, adopt a unified path and desist from the activities that further polarize the country.
Whereas Article 37 of the Constitution of Kenya guarantees every person the right to peacefully assemble, demonstrate, picket, and present petitions to public authorities, we observed government interference through the security agencies. For example, the demonstrators were deliberately policed ostensibly to protect and contain them in select areas of Nairobi and Kisumu.
ICJ Kenya is also alarmed by the statements of Professor Kithure Kindiki, Cabinet Secretary to the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination, that he would present to Parliament proposals to alter the Public Order Management Act, many of which are unlawful. We posit that any changes to legal and policy frameworks that react to the protests in public order management must not overreach the letter and spirit of the Constitution.
The ICJ Kenya showed concerns on the emerging reports of loss of lives and serious injuries during the protests, as well as the growing ethnic profiling, hate speech and incitement across various public and social media platforms. The jurist body further urged Kenyans to understand the unlawful events of 20th March and 27th March can potentially take the country on a dangerous path of lawlessness and impunity, with glaring ramifications to human rights, democracy, and the rule of law.
ICJ Kenya is further concerned that the events of 20th March 2023 and 27th March 2023 can potentially take the country on a dangerous path with glaring ramifications to human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. The protests closely mirror the events of the post-election violence in 2007, where political incitement led to atrocity crimes that resulted in mass killing, sexual and gender-based violence, grave injuries, and internal displacement of masses.
So for sure, ICJ Kenya will be defending the Constitution through the court processes, and we will support members of the public that are also raising questions around the violations of our constitutional imperatives.
Basing on the mentioned points of concern, ICJ Kenya made the following specific recommendations to the President and the Presidency. Recall and adhere the oath of office, that is, be faithful and bear truth allegiance to the Republic of Kenya, preserve and protect and defend the Constitution, protect and uphold the dignity of the people of Kenya. To the National Police Service, initiate timely and credible investigations and prosecution of individuals responsible for reported incidents of killing, arson, destruction of property, ethnic profiling, hate speech, incitement, and other crimes committed in connection with the protests. Adhere the guidelines of freedom of association and assembly in line with the letter and spirit of the Constitution. Act with professionalism, restraint, and respect for human rights at all times, among others. To Independent Policing Oversight Authority, initiate timely and credible investigations into the conduct of the police during the protest and pursue prosecutions against police officers, including commanders responsible for committing or permitting commission of crimes against civilians. To Azimio la Umoja Coalition, promote the spirit of unity within the country and call on other political factions aligned to the coalition to desist from utterances that could fuel insurgency. Organize people-centered protests with clear route plans and security measures for the safety and well-being of all parties to the protest, among others. To the Kenya Kwanza Coalition, adopt robust and meaningful measures to improve the enjoyment of critical social and economic rights currently undermined by the high cost of living, unemployment, inequality, and poverty. These issues are among the root causes of frequent violent protests that are being experienced in Kenya. To the citizen, exercise their right to protest peacefully and prescribed in the Constitution in 2010. Exercise their right to protest peacefully as prescribed in the Constitution of 2010, among other reasons. To the international community, publicly affirm that Kenya should abide by the United Nations basic principles on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials. The African Union weighs in and publicly affirms its commitment to ensuring that Africa achieves Aspiration 4 of Agenda 2063, which aspires for a peaceful and secure Africa through mechanisms that promote a dialogue-centered approach to conflict prevention and resolution. Hilary Kabila, GBS News.
President William Ruto was on Wednesday urged to bring civility into government. Speaking through Professor Fred Ogola in Nairobi, the Operation Linda Ugatuzi Civil Society has said that the president has disregarded the rule of law, and in spite of the fact that he took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution, the civil society observed that he does not actually follow the law. Kabila with that report.
William Ruto has today been urged to bring civility into his government. Speaking through Professor Fred Ogola in Nairobi, the Operation Linda Ugatuzi Civil Society pointed out that the appointment of 50 CAS was in total disregard of the law and a violation of the Constitution, in addition to creating unnecessary offices and allocating huge sums of money when Kenyans are suffering from high cost of living. Schools have no money for school feeding programs, and hospitals no medicine.
No one is above the law. His Excellency President William Ruto, we handed over you the government, trusting you that you live by the Constitution and ensure everybody under you does the same. let these officers step aside, let them be investigated. If they are clean, they'll come back. And of course, we are asking here because the court declared that CS positions were illegal. In fact, they were not supposed to be 50. He has appointed 50. This is illegal. This is in contempt of the court. How do we expect Kenyans to obey laws and the Constitution? So we are requesting the government to stop it. But the most painful thing is that 50 CSS being sworn into office and earning salaries, Kenyans will spend 50 billion every year to keep them in office. They have been given luxurious vehicles, allowances, yet you're being told there's no money for UNGA subsidies. There's no money for fuel subsidies. There's no money for education. The government has said they are so broke. They have not been disbursed money to counties. They are saying they have no money.
The civil society further condemned the looting and destruction of citizens' property, while citing examples such as burning of mosque and church in Kibera slums, the destruction of Northlands and Spectra farms, believed to be owned by the Kenyatta family and opposition leader Raila Odinga respectively.
On Monday, Kenyans went for Mandamano, but what happened is that the police did two things. There's what you call a sin of omission and sin of commission. Sin of omission was that the police were supposed to provide protection of property and lives to Kenyans on that day. And in some places, they deliberately omitted to do it. So we are requesting as Operation Ndogatuzi, he needs to step aside for him to be investigated. Secondly, Kimani Ichung'wah, Rigathi Gachagua, the deputy president. And then thirdly, the CS Trade, Moses Kuria. The news is there that they orchestrated, organized, orchestrated, and executed those destruction of property of Spectra and also Northlands property. They also, we are requesting, they are very senior people in government. They cannot be investigated when they are government. We are requesting they need to step aside, not that they are wrong. There is allegation. They cannot be investigated when they are outside.
According to Operation Linda Ugatuzi, on Monday, the police administration under the leadership of Japhet Koome committed a crime by both omission and commission. By omission is when they failed knowingly to provide security to guard the property of Kenyans at the Northlands belonging to the Kenyatta family, Spectra of Odinga, and the ones of Kenyans in Mathare, Kawangware and Kibera. By commission, when they themselves attacked peaceful demonstrators with water cannons, hence creating chaos that destroyed peace that led to destruction of property and lives. And for the above reasons, the civil society is demanding the Inspector General to step down. In the past 2 weeks, the National Police Fraternity have been in the spotlight due to their response to the protest organized by Azimio One Kenya Alliance. Hilary Kabila, GBS News.
There will be demonstrations in Kisumu and Nairobi, Azimio la Umoja and ODM leader Raila Odinga has confirmed. This was after governors of the two cities appeared to haggle over which county should host the anti-government protests that have been witnessed in the last 2 weeks. Raila addressed the media on yesterday evening, where he cleared the air following two statements released by Kisumu Governor Professor Anyang' Nyong'o and Nairobi Johnston Sakaja that appeared to suspend the demos in their respective counties. The first protests led by Odinga were called on March 20th with his Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition demanding electoral justice and for authorities to lower the cost of living. The protests have since escalated to 2 days a week, Monday and Thursday, in a move aimed at piling pressure on President William Ruto's administration to urgently address these issues. Monday's protests led to deaths and destruction of property in Nairobi, the Kenyan capital, and the lakeside city of Kisumu in the west of the country.
Our demonstrations are on. IG Koome, we served you with a notice, and we'll serve you with no further notices beyond tomorrow. Sababu imeonekana hawa polisi wameamua hawatafuata sheria za Kenya.
Again, I want to take this opportunity to thank Kenyans who have come to our meetings in the past. There was an announcement today by the governor of Kisumu about the demonstrations in Kisumu. We have talked with him, and he has actually asked us to announce that there will be demonstrations in Kisumu tomorrow, just like there will be in the rest of the country. We want these demonstrations to be peaceful. As we have said, we are invoking provisions of Article 37 of our Constitution. These demonstrations must be peaceful, and we also urge those who are planning to try to disrupt them to desist from doing so in the name of our Lord. Thank you.
So tumekuwa na muda mzuri wa kuzungumza. Tumejaribu pia kuelewa Mkenya wanavyoumia na pia changamoto ni nyingi, lakini tusiende zaidi tujiumize. Kwa hivyo tunaamini maombi, tutaombeana, na tunaamini kwamba it is possible to get this country back to where it was. We were doing well, we are doing well already, but we can do better. Kwamba tuwe wa Kenya wanao zidi kukaa na amani. Kama kuna wenzako wanaona na shida, tujaribu kuwasaidia. Na pia serikali, tafadhali, mnaalikwa kuweza kutumia njia za sawa. Sehemu ambapo tunaona kumeponyoka, tujirudi jamani. Mnaelewa ninaloongelea. Kuna watu labda wamesemekana wana changamoto zao kwa sababu wamekosa ulinzi, na sina la budi kusema kwamba Mungu yunasi. Mungu abariki nchi yetu ya Kenya. Sote tuwe watu naopenda nchi kama tulivyoonyesha wakati wa uchaguzi na mengineo. Na mwishoni jamani, ni kipindi ambacho cha ndugu zetu Waislamu, tuwatakia mfungo mwema. Ni wakati ambao ni Wakristo ambao wanajiandaa kwa kipindi cha Pasaka. Tuwatakie sherehe nzuri za Pasaka ijayo. Tuonane wakati unaofaa. Mazungumzo yanaendelea, hatujakamilisha, muda ndio umepungua, lakini tunashukuru sana nafasi ya kuwa na right honorable.
TIFA research on the 29th of March 2023 released public opinion on data problems facing Kenya and national government performance. This release focuses on the state of the economy, especially the main problems Kenyans are facing, as well as views regarding the main achievements and failures of the Ruto-led government so far, as well as Kenyans' desired priorities that it should address over the next few years. This is the second release from TIFA's first survey of 2023, which was household-based, conducted between March 11th to 19th, which with over 2,665 randomly selected respondents. James Othiambo with that report.
A research on the 29th of March 2023 released public opinion data on problems facing Kenyans and national government performance, as it is the second release from TIFA's first survey of 2023, which was household-based, conducted between March 11 to 19, with just over 2,065 randomly selected respondents. For the country as a whole, and across the current political divide, there are hardly any contrast in terms of what are identified as the main problems people are facing in their local areas, with the high cost of living, hunger, drought, and unemployment being by far the most frequently mentioned.
The identification of cost of living as the most challenging problem facing people in the area where our respondents live was highest in South Rift, in Western, and in Coast. 62%, 61%, and 58%. Hunger and drought was the most mentioned, or got its most mentions in Northern Kenya and in Lower Eastern, which is basically Ukambani. And when you look at the 9 zones that TIFA has used, you can see the reality of our data reflecting just what we've been told by government and also relief agencies. Now, some of you might ask, if the government or the Red Cross gives out results for each of the 47 counties, why don't we in TIFA do that also? And the simple reason is, with a sample of only 2,065, if we divided those people up into the 47 counties, most of the counties that have low populations would have so few respondents, the statistical margins of error would be too high. And therefore the results would not be comparable.
According to the TIFA research, the launch of the Hustlers Fund received far more mentions by Kenyans as an early success of the President Ruto's government than any other policy which applied to both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio supporters. Increasing economic hardship, however, is at the top of most Kenyans' minds in terms of its perceived failures.
In terms of the total, the achievement that most people could identify was the launch of the Hustler Fund at 29%. Again, this was a single response question. It doesn't mean that 29% of our respondents think the launch of the Hustler Fund was a good thing. It means when they were given the chance to give just one answer, and you see the question at the bottom of the screen, what do you think is the main failure? Again, a single response question. Overwhelmingly, it's economic hardship. Again, in a single mention, 37% of all our respondents, slightly more supporters of Azimio mentioned this than supporters of Kenya Kwanza, 41 versus 35, but that's only a 6% difference.
With regards to the findings in the second release of TIFA, it has been increasingly clear to most Kenyans that making quick, tangible improvements to the dire economic situation inherited from the previous regime has not been as forthcoming as many had thought or at least hoped. While the country has largely emerged from the social and economic constraints imposed to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, which was clearly handled more effectively in Kenya than in many other countries. James Odhiambo, GBS News.
Kwanza administration has not yet lived up to its billing in the fight against corruption. This is according to Operation Linda Ugatuzi Civil Society. In the recent times, the cost of living has been in the rise without a clear trace of taxpayers' money. According to Professor Fred Ogola, who addressed the media yesterday at the Milimani Law Courts in Nairobi, the money has been going into corruption and misplaced priorities, whereby the government has been wiring at least 1.8 billion Kenya shillings to Child Welfare Society of Kenya from the exchequer, yet the money has not been reaching the intended beneficiary. According to Professor Ogola, the government wires money to the Child Welfare Society of Kenya, headed by the CEO Irene Mureithi. The CEO then wires the money to the accounts of service providers. She would then withdraw that money and give it to those in the government who corruptly became the beneficiaries.
So I want to tell Kenyans that you are suffering not because there is no money. This government is collecting 9 billion daily. When Maandamano took place and they said Nairobi only did not collect 4 billion, if you look at what government collects in taxes, I can tell you we are collecting around 9 billion per day. By the way, Operation Ugatuzi has already looked at 57 files of corruption, and we shall be releasing them one by one. So the first file we are releasing today is a high voltage file. It is for Child Welfare Society of Kenya. Child Welfare Society of Kenya looks like a government entity that has been receiving money from government coffers since 2011, meaning that it was created during Moi regime. Kibaki inherited that regime. They have been receiving funding every year. Uhuru inherited that regime. They have been receiving that funding every year. Now the new government, we have seen they have requested for a budget. So the budget is being ready in June. They are also in that budget. They are going to receive over 1.8 billion shillings, yet they are doing nothing with it. But where the money goes, the signatory is one person called Irene Mureithi. This same Irene is the signatory of Child Welfare Society of Kenya, but the money goes to account where she's the signatory. She withdraws that money and gives to her people that he eats within government.
Mine is just to emphasize about the misappropriation and embezzlement of funds within the organization. The interest of the organization has never been to support the children. What I've seen there since my starting of my career there, back in 2014, the money used to be wired from the treasury, but the unfortunate thing is that the CEO with her group had opened what we call the contractors' accounts, whereby they used to channel funds.
We've not been paid our salaries for 3 years. We are suffering in the name of Irene Mureithi. She has frustrated us for so long. She has not paid us our gratuity, our salaries. We've been cut loans that we've had in circles. We are suffering, and we are asking the Deputy President and the President to do something about it.
President Yoon Suk-yeol and U.S. President Joe Biden announced that South Korea will host a future Third Summit for Democracy in a joint statement on Wednesday, highlighting the two countries' shared bonds and values of Seoul's growing global leadership. The two leaders issued the statement just ahead of the Biden Second Summit for Democracy, which Yoon co-hosted. Jennifer Macau with that report.
The United States and the Republic of Korea share deep bonds rooted in their common democratic value and respect for human rights, and they are committed to further strengthening of their robust political, economic, security, and people-to-people ties. The two leaders further noted that Korea's democratic institutions are a beacon of strength into the Indo-Pacific and demonstrate to the world that democracy fosters the conditions needed to calculate continued security and prosperity. They also recognize that in recent years, Korea has emerged as a global leader at large because of the enduring commitment of its people to increasing governmental transparency, ensuring effective checks and balances, and developing laws that are responsive to public needs. The Biden administration has worked to unite democracies aligned with the United States, in contrast to the global trend towards the authoritarianism of autocracies like Russia and China. The two-day Summit for Democracy, which runs through Thursday, brought together some 120 global leaders invited by Biden over a virtual conference. Korea was among the 5 co-hosting countries alongside Costa Rica, the Netherlands, Zambia, and the United States. Yoon led the first plenary session of democracy, delivering economic growth and shared prosperity, and highlighted Korea's role as a defender of democracy. Jennifer Macau, GBS News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu voiced confidence on Wednesday that he would find compromise with the political opposition over his judicial overhaul after contested reforms drew a strong reproach from the U.S. President Joe Biden. Israel can't continue down this road, Biden told reporters on Tuesday in reference to the unprecedented protests that have swept the country and penetrated its military. Spurring Netanyahu's defense, the chief to break ranks and call for a halt, the conservative Israeli leader did not press the pause button on Monday to allow the negotiation for the opposition parties. Addressing the U.S.-led Summit for Democracy, he said and stated the reason for these reforms, balancing the branches of Israeli government, could be reconciled with civil liberties. The negotiations, he said, will try to achieve a broad national consensus to achieve both goals. And he believes that this is possible, and they are now engaged in exactly the conversation. Lila Linjok with that report.
Opposition parties spanning the political spectrum have accused Netanyahu, who is on a trial on corruption charges, of seeking to curb judicial independence. He denies any wrongdoing.
What happened during the last 24 hours is madness. They've lost their sense and they've lost their way. It's proof that this government has lost all control and is dangerous for the state of Israel. It endangers Israel's security. Our home is in danger.
Separately, Netanyahu predicted on Wednesday that Israel will join the U.S. visa waiver program in September after passing legislation required by Washington. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem had no immediate comment. In another signal of business as usual, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, whose dissent on the face of the judicial overhaul prompted Netanyahu to announce his dismissal on Sunday, triggering a surge in the demonstration, and foreign alarm oversaw the launch of a new Israeli spy satellite on Wednesday. Gallant then posted a picture of himself hosting the foreign minister of Azerbaijan, a major defense partner of Israel. Aide said that Gallant never got a formal dismissal letter from Netanyahu.
We are facing not an enemy, but brothers. And I say we cannot have a civil war. This is a crisis that endangers our basic unity. This crisis requires that we all act responsibly.
The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Tom Neitz, on Tuesday held out the possibility that Netanyahu might soon be invited to the White House after acceding to the compromise talk. Netanyahu noted his rapport with the President Joe Biden and the unbreakable alliance between the countries, but said Israel will chart a course by the will of its people and not based on pressure from abroad. Lena Lunjok, GBS News.
External pressure will not stop Taiwan engaging with the world, President Tsai Ing-wen said on Wednesday as she left for the United States, hinting a defiant note after China threatened retaliation if she met U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. China, which claims democratically ruled Taiwan its own territory, has repeatedly warned U.S. officials not to meet Tsai, viewing it as a support for the island's desire to be seen as a separate country. Jennifer with that report.
China staged war games around Taiwan last August when the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei, and Taiwan's armed forces have said they are keeping watch for any Chinese moves when Tsai is abroad. President Tsai is going to Guatemala and Belize, transiting through New York first and Los Angeles on the way back. While not officially confirmed, she is expected to meet McCarthy while in California. Taiwan's government rejects China's sovereignty claims, and while she has repeatedly offered talks Beijing, she has also said only Taiwan's people can decide their future. Her trip has unnerved security agencies in Taiwan, who worry that China could launch a series of influence campaigns, including spreading misinformation on social media platforms to sway public perceptions of Tsai's U.S. transit, according to an internal memo by Taiwan Security Agency. The note said China has used large-scale influence campaigns, including cyber attacks against Taiwan during Pelosi's visit last year, and Taiwan authorities expected Beijing to deepen its cognitive operations in the coming days. China says that both it and Taiwan belong to one China, and that a Chinese province, the island has no right to any sort of state-to-state ties. Taiwan strongly disputes that view. Jennifer Macau, GBS News.
Once again, a big thank you for joining this live broadcast. And on that note, we're going to be taking a look at the newspaper reviews. But first, let's take a very fast commercial break.
Nakukaribisha tena katika makao makuu yako katika ulimwengu wa michezo.
Yoga is not a sport. Yoga is actually a way of life. Ukiona FIFA inaingilia kati, it means that the FIFA rules have been violated.
From day one akiingia kwa akademi yako, unamwambia masomo na talent lazima ziende. The moment nasikia masomo imeenda hivi chini, hata time out. Hata hiyo time out kwa football na kando.
Yeah, wanawake ni wengi actually mpaka saa hizi. Tumekaa ni kama tumekuwa wanawake wamekuwa wengi kuliko wanaume. Kuna wale ambao ni artistic. Yes, wanapenda mambo ya kuigiza.
I am coded to look for solutions.
You limit yourself, not the sport doesn't limit you.
We say a dedicated women-only show that focuses only on women.
everywhere. GBS.
Good morning once again. Today, Thursday, the 30th of March. And thank you for joining this live broadcast. You're still watching Morning Extra. And right now, we're going to be taking a look at the newspaper reviews. I am joined by one governance and political analyst, one Mr. Peter Chapesa. And together, we'll be going through what is happening in the leading newspaper of the Republic of Kenya. The SMS line is 21144 and GBS TV Africa in all our social media handles. Make sure to leave a comment there and keep the conversation going. Good morning, Mr. Peter Chapesa.
Good morning, Beatrice.
Yes. I'm hoping all is well. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this live broadcast. And now just to move straight away to the stories making headlines in the leading newspaper, let's take a look at the Daily Nation and what is making headlines over there as well. And what is U.S. Senator meets rival camps as Western nations call for a peaceful resolution, and fallout in Ruto camp as U.S. wades into row. Now, before we even get to the topic there about the U.S. Senator meets the rival camps, let's just talk about what are the states of affairs in the country from where you sit?
Yes, Beatrice, the fallout they're talking about is the U.S. Leading official who led the delegates to Nairobi for talks. You know, this is a U.S. officer who led the negotiation and handshake between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta in the previous regime, and is the one who is coming again to negotiate for the same peace deal. And you know, this is the thing that worries
before you even comment on that,
yes.
I was saying, before we even talk about that, I'd like you to tell us the state of affairs in the country before we even get to where we are right now.
Now, Beatrice, as you know, today, Raila Odinga declared demonstration. The president is away, but there are so many things happening underneath. People who are opposed to demonstrations are also planning how to counterattack demonstrations. And the opposition is also organizing demonstrations. So this is actually bringing about confusion in the country, particularly to small business people, mama bogas, border borders, and other small merchants, because they are confused whether to go to work or not to go to work, because they get interrupted by demonstrations. And also it's affecting working class, people who work from the city. Now it becomes very difficult for people to go to work because of uncertainty associated with the demonstrations. So the state of affairs is there is confusion, there is an uncertainty, there is pessimism associated with the demonstrations and conflict between politicians. So I wish that the government could find a way of ending this political rivalry and conflicts in this country.
And maybe you can comment on the same on the U.S. Senator meets rival camps as Western nation call for a peaceful resolution that you're talking about. And there at the Daily Nation, you can see a picture there of the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, with U.S. Senator Chris Coons at Harambee House Annex, Nairobi yesterday. And of course, we make sure to take a look at that story as well. And maybe you can also comment on the same.
Yes, Beatrice, you know, Mr. Kroon, the U.S. lead delegate, led political ceasefire in Kenya between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. When we had also the same situation, he was sent here and he negotiated for a ceasefire. And that's why we had handshake. This is the same man who has come again. And if you look at body language of the deputy president, is uncomfortable. If there's one thing the deputy president is completely against, it is handshake. Because he knows that the moment Ruto and Raila have handshake, he will be rendered useless. He will be rendered useless because Raila Odinga commands a sizable supporters, and Deputy President also commands sizable supporters. And when these two shake hands, some of people like Deputy President will be rendered ineffective. They will not be regarded with that weight they may be having at the moment. And maybe they can also bear the consequences of political statements and the activities they have been having against Raila Odinga and also the former president. Because when these two gentlemen have handshake, yes, Raila Odinga will come with the interest of his supporters, like Uhuru Kenyatta, Martha Karua, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. He's carrying their interest, and also others like Jakoya, who is supporting him. He has their interest, okay? And given the fact that Deputy President has been organized, it's alleged that has been organizing anti-demonstration or invasion of Uhuru Kenyatta's farm or Raila Odinga's business farm. He'll bear the consequences. That's why he's a worried man. He's a worried man seeing Kroon again coming back to negotiate for the ceasefire and handshake. Yes.
And even as we talk about the meeting of the US Senate and of course advocating for the handshake, there has been a lot of calls on the dialogue between the leaders of this country. We have the International Commission of Jurists. Yesterday they met and of course they did call on the same. We have the NICC also calling on the same. We have Christian and Muslim leaders also calling on the same. But seeing that it has bared no fruit so far, is there any chance for or hope for that?
There's a chance. Even in previous regimes, we had hardliners who took hostage of these two people. Even during 2007, we had hardliners who made it somehow difficult for Raila and Kibaki to handshake. But when these two people met, those hardline voices were rendered useless. So, one thing I'm very sure of, Raila Odinga and Ruto are going to shake hands. They are going to shake hands not because they want, and it's because of the pressure from international partners and also local partners for the sake of Kenya. Remember, B3 is not all about Ruto, it's not all about Raila Odinga, it's all about common mwananchi. It's all about economic interest of this country. It's all about stability of this country. Hardline won't help anything. Hardline will only accelerate conflict, accelerate anarchy, accelerate bitterness. Okay? But when these two gentlemen calm down and have that sobriety and put Kenya first, ahead of their interests, ahead of the interests of small clique of individuals, they will put Kenya first, and they will handshake, and there will be ceasefire, and Kenya will start to grow, and even themselves will become healthy because there will be no pressure, too much pressure coming from conflicting interests. Yes.
And now let us continue with the Daily Nation and see what is also making headlines there. We see attack the Kenyatta farm raid, reports of split in government over brazen invasion of former president's property. Maybe if you have a comment on that before we even move forward to other headlines.
Yes. You know, people who planned for the invasion of Uhuru Kenyatta's farm are a few individuals. I don't think that all group or politicians from Central could really wish to do that. It's only a clique of few individuals who are bitter, who feel that Uhuru Kenyatta is funding Raila Odinga's demonstration that may lead to handshake. This is a group of people who feel uncomfortable, who are allegedly who are alleged, it's alleged that they planned for the invasion of the land. But we also have to understand clearly, Beatrice, that it's very criminal to do that. This is a political exercise. Political exercise done through demonstrations. Invasion of land is criminal. Looting of people's property is criminal. Demonstration is not criminal. Maiming and killing is criminal. So leaders planning to invade other people's properties are criminals, And now law should take charge. And also demonstrators who engage in looting, maiming, and killing, they're criminals, and the law should take charge. So I encourage that our leaders become sober. They should stop these raw emotions and artificial excitement because of little power they have. Power is transient. Power is very transient. They should think of a bigger good for the common good for all Kenyans, not their small interests that only exist for a small period of time.
And now, there's also another headline there, protest on Azimio to go ahead with demonstrations even after meeting U.S. Senator Chris Coons, church leaders. Before, of course, we have indeed talked about that. But the issue here is many are worried that a replica of what happened on Monday, you know, the issue of Kibra, and you also know the issue of the Kenyatta farm raid and also the Odinga family property as well. And many were worried that a replica of the same would happen. Have you seen any cautions or any measurements that have been taken to prevent a replica of what happened on Monday, basing on what the things that we have heard from the Kenya Kwanza and what you'd hope to see, especially in terms of what some of their leaders their leaders had said as well, and of course the Azimio leaders team, what they had said as well?
When I hear the pronouncements by some government officials and the pronouncement by opposition leaders who are leading demonstrations, there's no serious measures that has been taken, apart from each group preparing to counterattack each other. Officials in the government are preparing to counterattack, and the opposition are preparing to go ahead with demonstrations. But I could also caution the government officials that opposition group have clearly indicated that their demonstrations will be peaceful. I wish that the government side don't use violence to disrupt demonstrators. Instead, they should just take charge to ensure that these demonstrations doesn't turn violent. Demonstrations are well protected so that no violence is created. But if the government uses police to counterattack or disperse peaceful demonstrations, then it will turn violent. You know, I can give you a case example of 2017 when Raila swore himself in. When the government decided to withdraw security officers from interrupting the swearing in of Raila Odinga, it happened peacefully, and at the end of the day, they went back to their houses. Okay? They went back to their houses because they had no any other option other than just engaging in what they wanted and go back to their houses. So also this time around, the government should not interrupt the peaceful demonstrations as indicated by the opposition leaders. But they should just take charge to ensure that it doesn't turn violent. So that at least we see how this demonstration can be in this country. But just having unnecessary fears, yes, is good to be conscious, is good to take care, but we should not just be extreme. not just big swim. Demonstrators are Kenyans. They are businessmen in this country. They also work in this country. So if they are demonstrating peacefully, we should give them a chance to air out, to offload their anger, to offload their frustrations, their concerns peacefully. But the moment they become subservient to the law, then the government should take charge and arrest any criminal that will loot or destroy people's property. Yes, Beatrice.
And because the demonstrations are set to happen today, and of course there was a talk yesterday, I don't know if you were keeping up with that, on what they were negotiating on where to have the demonstration. That was between Kisumu City and then Nairobi City, where they finally agreed to have the demonstration in the both cities. Now, the hesitation on the hosting of the demos, what are your thoughts on that?
Pardon?
I'm saying there was a talk on where the demonstrations were supposed to either to happen in Kisumu or Nairobi. And now, of course, the governor of Kisumu, Anyang' Nyong'o, had cancelled the demonstration. But later yesterday, he did, of course, update and say that we are going now to have the demonstrations. The demonstrations were originally only supposed to happen in Nairobi, and they're hesitating in the decision making of the two counties. What do you take of that?
Beatrice, Anyang' Nyong'o, what informed Anyang' Nyong'o to cancel demonstrations in Kisumu? The government seat is in Nairobi. And when demonstrations happen in Kisumu, they interrupt Anyang' Nyong'o's programs. The government seat is not in Kisumu. The government seat is in Nairobi. And these demonstrations happen in Kisumu is not very effective. They destroy properties, people of Kisumu. They destroy the infrastructure that Anyang' Nyong'o has struggled to make. Okay? And given the fact that the government is not seriously funding some of these things, it becomes very costly. The government of Kisumu County. Okay? And Anyang' Nyong'o thought that the concentration of demonstrations should be in Nairobi, where the government sits, where the government operates, the seat of the government, so that the message can reach the government. Okay? But also, our county governor of Nairobi also felt that the same way demonstrations interrupts business operations in Kisumu, the same way it can also interrupt business operations in Nairobi. He also wants to operate in a very calm and conducive environment. When demonstrations happen in Nairobi, it will interfere with Sakaja's programs. So there was that conflict. So this conflict could lead into confusion for the demonstrators. So Anyang' Nyong'o had no option but to allow, for the sake of the planned demonstrations in Nairobi, so that Sakaja could not feel that Anyang' Nyong'o is pushing for disruptions in Nairobi. Okay? But demonstration should be peaceful. It should not degenerate into destruction of properties, lootings, and killings. It should be peaceful. Because they want to make a statement. They want to send a message to the president. But this message can be sent peacefully, not through violence. So the organizers of these demonstrations should ensure that they caution their members to stay peaceful. And so the government side should ensure that the security officers don't necessarily interfere with peaceful demonstrations, but make sure that law is not broken. law and order is maintained. Yes.
And now, moving yet to another headline there, we see Interior CS Kindiki puts violent protesters on notice as he vows to protect Kenyans' businesses. And if you are keeping up with the happenings, yesterday you could see the Interior Cabinet Secretary, Professor Kithure Kindiki, saying that now he will be giving policy directions to IG Koome, of course, to the Inspector General, on how to contain and run the demonstrations. Do you feel that that will make any difference? We have the stakeholders, we have the ICJ, the Interior Commission of Jurists, yesterday saying the police are going against the right of the Kenyans to demonstrate, and of course, treating the Kenyans harshly. You have many stakeholders coming out and saying that the National Police Service is going against its role in playing the part of maintaining the rule of law. Do you feel that these statements or these sentiments bring any difference with what has been happening in the demonstrations?
Beatrice, I welcome Professor Kindiki's approach. And Professor Kindiki is a lawyer. He's a serious lawyer in this country. He knows the boundaries. He knows the law. And that's why he's advocating that everything should happen within the law. And he's cautioning security agency to ensure that law is not broken, law and order is maintained amid these demonstrations. I wish that Koome, the IG, of National Police Service Commission, also trains his officers how to behave during this time of demonstrations, so that we don't lose life, so that we don't destroy our properties, our businesses, by disorderly members of our society participating in demonstrations. So it's a matter of the police service and also the citizens agreeing on how to do their things, so that law and order is maintained and peace and tranquility is maintained as they make their voices heard by the government side. Yes, Beatrice.
You know, an issue that we've already discussed, and do make sure to talk about the state of the nation. The SMS line is 21144. Leave a comment there, and GBS TV Africa in all our social media handles. And now, just moving on with the Daily Nation, there is another headline there that we have already talked about: the on off and on again after calling off demos in Kisumu City. Governor Nyong'o forced to make a quick U-turn. That is an issue that we have already addressed. And now, how banks make billions as other sectors struggled. Kenyan banks earned record profits last year, in a sharp contrast to firms in each other sectors that posted profit slumps on losses. The profits rally was driven by a sharp jump in earnings from interest on loans and government securities, and a similarly rapid growth in income and transaction fees and foreign exchange trading. That is indeed very, very interesting. Maybe do you have a comment on that? How banks make millions as other sectors struggle?
Yes, on daily basis, banks make money because people put their money in the banks. Particularly small and medium enterprises are actively engaging banks, borrowing, running businesses, paying back like this, small loans like this. So this is making banks to be very, very active, very, very active, because at this point of time where economy is hard, people are running to banks to borrow money. And as they borrow money, because of also stringent laws, they have to pay back. This makes banks to be very, very active during the time and moment. So that's how banks are making money, because of actively engaging with SMEs on daily basis. Yes, yes.
And now, property, you can now sell land without your child consent. A court in Kisii has made a landmark ruling granting parents freedom to sell their land without consulting their children. The president setting judgment is likely to influence decisions on many land disputes, putting parents against their children. What do you take of that?
Yes, I find also that law weird because you know, when you have children, whatever you have is for your children. But also at the same time, there comes a time when parents don't have any source of income. Maybe they want treatment and their children cannot provide. So if you talk of consulting them before they do, consulting your children before you sell a piece of land to offset your problems, to solve some of the problems, it becomes very difficult. Because you may find that some of your children may be out of the country, may be far away, cannot be easily reached, and you are dying because of sickness. So it becomes very difficult to find your child to consult or to agree. Even some of them don't agree to that, making their parents' life very difficult. So it was somehow unnecessary that the law becomes lenient. But also, I feel that this kind of judgment may lead to some parents abusing the law. Will start selling land unnecessarily, leaving their children poor, leaving their children destitute, leaving their children landless. Okay? I wish that it could be guided properly so that we avoid unnecessary selling of land by some parents. Yes.
And on education, we see the pride for ECDE teachers as court holds to pay cut orders. The Employment and Labor Relations Court has suspended the implementation of a circular by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission that seeks to slash pay of teachers in early childhood development and education. Maybe if you have a comment on that.
Don't have comment on that.
Now, the cost of living, the biggest worry for majority of Kenyans. Nearly half of Kenyans, drawn from both sides of the political divide, identify the high cost of living experienced in the country as one of the biggest problems that needs to be addressed urgently by the government of the President William Ruto. A new opinion poll has shown. This is one of the issues that the demonstrations are very vocal about, the cost of living. But then, talking about the cost of living and things like the IBC reconstruction and things like that, these are policy issues that need to be addressed in Parliament. Taking those issues to the streets, do you feel there's an address to that and maybe a moving forward from the government addressing and putting in consideration the government is barely 6 months or so in of course, in leadership, and maybe being fair, maybe they are yet to adjust to how maybe they can deal to that issues. Do you feel the cost of living is something that can be lowered?
Beatrice, cost of living is high. And that's a fact.
Yes.
But the opposition is taking advantage of the cost of living, the high cost of living, to do their politics. They're using it to whip emotions. They're using it to mobilize for demonstrators in the streets. But even if they were the ones in power, still the cost of living could be high. We had opposition and the government working together during the outgoing regime. The cost of living was so high. There were no demonstrations. Okay? But Kenyans endured. But because now the opposition is not the government, they are now taking advantage of the cost of living to mobilize for demonstrations. But their interest is political power. They are disrupting this government, they are derailing this government, so that they paint it as an unperforming government for the purpose of snatching power from them. This is politics. Yes, the government should work out a solution to this problem. They should work out. But that can only be possible when there's peace in the country, when Kenyans are working, when there's no sabotage from anywhere, from the opposition, from any quarters. So when, like now today, most of the people will not go to work because they are disrupted by demonstrations. How will the government get taxes? How will some people eat? They have not gone to work. How will they survive? This is the kind of the disruptions that affect us economically. But if people are working on a daily basis, like, yes, we are struggling, but we could still overcome. So the opposition is taking advantage of volatile situation, the high cost of living, to mobilize people against this government, to mobilize people against this government. And that is merely politics, Beatrice. Yes.
Away from that, the SMS line is 21144, GBS TV Africa in all our social media handles. Let's later move to the Standard and see what is also making headlines in the Standard as well. And there, the Standard, we can see salary relief for 45,000 nursery school teachers. And that is, of course, on the national page 5. Do make sure to dig in and see what is happening. Children keep off parents' land deals. That is on national page 4. That is an issue that has made headlines in the Daily Nation as well. And costly loans back on a CBK rate up, that is on Business Daily, there, page 24. And Harambee Stars coach promise, that is on page 48. Now, the headlines there, that is, the headline there is the buck stops here. The dust is yet to settle on the chaotic events of Monday, and another round of demos is on today. The 6 men below bear the greatest responsibility of defining the course of events and maintaining the nation's stability for millions looking up to them. Will they step up to plate? The picture there you can see of President William Samoei Ruto, and of course he vowed that impunity will not define his legacy. And you see the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, there. He has elected to bury his head in the sand, of course, and the highest politician authority in the land at the moment, and he has elected to bury his head in the sand while calling the shots from his office. And then we have the Inspector General of Police Service, Jaffe Koome, there, has declared the Azimio demonstrations illegal, presided over police inaction in the Kenyatta family's Northlands farm invasion. And then we have the DPP, Northern Haji, says he has demanded to be handed the big fish financiers of the planners of the chaos, not for spurs but for persecution. And we have the the Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki there has proposed radical measures to limit the right to picket. He said nothing of the biosecurity response to Monday's event. And we have there a picture of the opposition leader Raila Odinga, the principal behind the Mondays and Thursday demos. He has stuck to his guns despite fervent calls to back down and call off the protest. From what we can see, making headlines there are the Standards, are these pictures of these 5 people that are said to be the one who are going to control and whether they will be able to step to plate. We have the president, we have the deputy president, we have the IG, we have the DPP, we have the Interior Cabinet Secretary, and we have the opposition leader Raila Odinga. Maybe you can merge the 5 and tell us how they relate in these demonstrations and whether you are expecting them to step to plate and do what each is ought to do.
Beatrice, to me, I believe the buck stops with the president and the opposition leader. These other people only receives command from these 2 people. The government side, all the people under the president, like the minister, IGs, and deputy president, also all only receives command from the president. And also the opposition is led by Raila Odinga. So the buck stops with the president and the opposition leader. The president should decide how he wants this country to be run. Okay? And his decisions will determine where Kenya will go. Okay? If he decides that we have handshake to calm the situation, yes, that's the way that it will go. If he decides that there will be no handshake, all these people under him will follow suit. Okay? If he decides a handshake, will oppose. All these people working under him will not oppose that. If he decides that there will be no handshake, people working under him, like Deputy President and the rest, will follow suit. Okay? So the buck stops at the president. And also, for demonstrations to stop, buck stops at Raila Odinga's doorstep. So they have to decide where to take Kenya. They have to make it clear where they want to drive Kenya to. And if they decide unwisely, then we shall slide into anarchy and we shall suffer as Kenyans. So it's upon these leaders to decide carefully how they want, where they want to lead Kenya to. To peace, tranquility, and development, or to anarchy, confusion, and death and destruction.
Yes.
They have to make it clear. Yes.
Now, just moving on with the Standard, away from that to another case, we have Monica Mada, Maribe, and Joey have a case to answer. That is a story that has been happening, I don't know, for the past 2 years, and maybe that you can take a look on the national page 6 as well. I would like us to move real quick and go to the Star and what is making headlines there. We see Ruto demos not about the cost of living, but some election results, quote unquote. And the headline there that is really shouting there is why Kindiki was silent over the demos. Interior CS told President Ruto he was uncomfortable about certain responses to protests. And then you can see a photo there of President William Ruto and Alexander De Croo, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Belgium, and the Federal Public Service Chancellery of the Prime Minister of Brussels, Belgium. Yesterday, on the right, you can see Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua at Kogosho Secondary School in Mathira, Nyeri County. And of course, you can see what is happening there. I think that is an issue we already addressed on the Kindiki issue. Now, the CS Kindiki, 2000, invaded and stole from Uhuru Farms. The Interior Kithure Kindiki broke his silence over Northland's attack, saying 2,000 people stormed the property. He said the police to expedite investigations, warning no more violent demos will be allowed. And then Joey Maribe have a case to answer in Monica's murder. Journalist Jackie Maribe will now take a stand to defend herself in the murder of businesswoman Monica Kimani that happened 5 years ago. A judge ruled yesterday. And there you can see another photo there, and the headline there is Raila meets Nubian Christians, say demons on. Wiper boss Kalonzo Musyoka, ODM Raila Odinga, and Nubian community leader Amani Salim Nubian at Jaramogi Odinga. Now, looking at this Christian meeting, Raila meeting Nubian Christians and says the demons on. Now, in the demos, we did see in Kibra, there was a church that did get banned, and in Nairobi, I believe a mosque also did receive the same. And we have seen several stakeholders coming out. We have the International Commission of Jurists yesterday saying that we are looking at the kind of demonstrations that will lead to ethnic and religious religious differences. Are we looking at a ticking time bomb of what happened, of a replica of what happened in 2007, and the demonstration losing their course on what they are demonstrating about?
Beatrice, during demonstrations, we have different characters. We have certain people who push for different agenda. Like now, the kind of things we saw during last demonstrations this Monday, it's a few individuals wanted to push this issue into a religious war between Muslims and Christians. Okay? So if Muslims could have retaliated burning of churches. Christians could have also retaliated by burning more mosques, and could have taken a religious angle. I don't think if that's the intention of the opposition or the demonstrators. Demonstrators are demonstrating against the government. I believe it has no religious agenda. But people who want to push these demonstrations to religious agenda want to bring about religious wars. So instead of political issues, it takes religious wars. And this excavates anarchy in this country. It was only fair for the opposition leader to meet these two religious groups and make his stand clearly known. That's not about religion. It's about political agenda of this country. And I commend him for that, for meeting this, so that these two groups, so that the religious groups, so that nobody comes and creates a religious conflict in this country, because that can be very, very drastic.
And now let us move to People's Daily and what is making headlines in the newspaper as well. Now we see we have a case to answer. Joey and Marie Betold, that is on page 2 of People's Daily. That is a headline that have made headlines in all the newspapers that we have looked at. And the high cost of living, biggest problem for Kenyans. Poll survey says 48% of Kenya Kwanza and 47% of Azimio supporters worry about inflation. And then blow to your youth in land ruling. No, you cannot stop your parents from selling their land just because you had hoped to inherit it. Children told in groundbreaking verdict that will shake families and shape succession battles. Protest, Kenya faces tough test. Do or die day. Raila powers ahead of the plan to lead demos, overruling Governor Nyong'o's for trying to exempt Kisumu. Gachagua and Kindiki send a tough warning, saying any chaos will be stopped. Envoys call for rule of law to prevail on pages 4, 5, 6, and 7. Make sure to take a look at that as well. And suing for peace, Western envoys as friends and partners to Kenya, and we are deeply concerned by the recent unrest and welfare as well as the destruction of places of worship and private property. It is also damaging economic activity at a time of financial challenges. And you see there the civil society, we are on the brink of the appropriate, and unless the current situation is addressed urgently, we run the risk of fighting to close the suit as well. And then we see Kithure Kindiki there, a photo of him, and the statement there, no more violent protests shall be allowed anywhere in Kenya. That is, of course, what is happening in the country as we speak. I believe those are issues that we have already addressed in the previous papers. Let us move to matters business and see what is happening in the business world. And we see the thought of re-engineering climate runs risk as having anticipated adverse effects worse than the issues they intended to address. And see Kenyatta's Equity CEO top in the 63 billion bank dividends, where we see Kenyatta there at 924.29 million Kenyan shillings, and we have Ndegwa family with 876.65 million Kenyan shillings. We have the James Mangi family there with 685.3 million Kenyan shillings. We have Gideon Muriuki, that is 154 million Kenyan shillings. We have Balubai, and then we have Patel's family with 139.92 million Kenya shillings. We have Peter Monga's family with 37.7 million Kenya shillings. Of course, this is the top dividend earners. And the families of Jomo Kenyatta and former Central Bank of Kenya Governor Philip Ndegwa and Equity Group Chief Executive among top beneficiaries of combined 63 billion dividends that Kenya listed banks are set to pay. And now, on other headlines there, American tycoons scout for ICT agri-tech deals in Nairobi. American investors have prioritized deals in ICT, apparel and agriculture after Biden administration targeted Kenya as a key trading partner on the continent to develop durable solutions and advance supply chain resilience for world's largest economy. And this is a step in the right direction now that the American tycoons scout for ICT and, of course, the Biden issue of making Kenya as a key trading partner. How does that find Kenya in these harsh economic times?
Yes, harsh economic time doesn't mean that business cannot happen. Business can happen because on daily basis, we have things that we cannot do without.
Yes.
As you know, nowadays, information technology is very, very necessary. And when you invest in this area, you cannot fail to get serious returns. So, economic times, you need solutions. And solution is to create business opportunities that can also change the lives of Kenyans for the better. For the better. So I really encourage our government to create a more conducive environment for the investor to find it important to invest in Kenya. So I appreciate the effort being made by the government to market Kenya abroad and to attract investment in this country. The only thing that remains is now to create a conducive environment for the investors to operate in. Yes, because
and there we can see another headline there in the Business Daily as well. Kenya's special economic zones get on power rate. Investors domiciled in the 15 special economic zones will from Saturday start paying a special tariff of 10 Kenya shillings per kilowatt hour as the energy regulator moves to harmonize the rates and entice more farms to set up tax-free regions. And now the Britain profit increases to 1.6 billion Kenya shillings on cost cutting. Britam Holdings has posted a 1.69 billion net profit for the year ending December 2022 on reduced cost, marking a recovery from 72 million and in the previous year. And the very last headlines there is the CBK signals costly loans after hiking rates of 5-year high. To make sure to dig in, that is just headlines that are making headlines in the Business Daily for the lovers of business. To make sure to dig in and see what is happening in Kenya's business world. And also to make sure to dig in on the other newspapers as well, the Daily Nation, the Standard, the Star, People's Daily, and see what is also happening in the country as we speak, even as the demos are set to happen today, Mr. Chapesa. And I don't know if we have seen what has happened, because if we all have been watching, we have seen it's a majority of the protestants are youths who are protesting on Mondays, and those are working days, and many are saying this is affiliated to lack of jobs and things like that. And even as we pray for a peaceful demonstration that ought to happen today, I hope you can give your parting shot and also give a word on the same as we conclude this.
It's very true that the majority of people who are demonstrating are young people who are unemployed. And also we have political supporters, people who support passionately their political leaders. Rodinga has got serious political supporters who can forego working to join him in demonstrations. And also have idle youths who are not employed, who just find an opportunity to be active by demonstrating. And also have criminals who take advantage of demonstrations to loot. So all these characters are, become part and parcel of this kind of things. I want to encourage our leaders to be sober, remove emotions, remove bitterness, remove grudges, and just be sober. And think of each other to be important. Okay, put Kenya first. I believe Raila Odinga and Ruto had an agenda for this country. And their agenda was to grow this country, to make this country very beautiful. Raila Odinga not making it to the presidency doesn't mean that he cannot contribute. He can contribute. Our president should find it necessary to engage the opposition leader without pressures of hardliners, so that a solution can be found for Kenya to remain peaceful, to remain conducive, to remain calm, for businesses to grow, for people to live and engage and invest. So I humbly pray that these two leaders think deeply, put Kenya first, bring down their egos, pride, and interests, and let the interest of Kenya be a priority. And the interest of Kenya should be peace, should be unity, and should be development. So that during last regime, Kenya showed the world how to solve political problems. We provide a solution, and we saw it being replicated in other countries world over. We should not destroy that goodwill. We should not destroy that leadership we had proved the world. So I thank you so much, Beatrice, and to all the viewers.
Thank you so much, Chapesa, of course, for joining us and going through what is making headlines and the analysis of the newspaper as well. And a big thank you for taking time and joining us live, and we do hope to have more of this conversation. And you have heard it from the expert. That was Peter Chapesa, a political and governance analyst. The SMS line is 21144, GBS TV Africa in all our social media handles. And due to time, I'll not be taking a look at the tweets, but keep sending them. I will take a look at them later on. And that brings us to the end of our morning extra segment today. My name is Beatrice Njeri, and have yourself a good day.
Everywhere, GBS.
Nakukaribisha tena katika makao makuu yako katika ulimwengu wa michezo.
Yoga is not a sport. Yoga is actually a way of life.
Ukiona FIFA inaingilia kati, it means that